Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Bring Back V10s Extra. We answer questions posed to us from people in the Race Members Club. As always, we've had far too many questions during season 11, but we are doing our best to do as many of these bonus shows as we can with the regular guests from the show to pile through questions, a bit of a rapid fire, pile through some questions. It's not going to be rapid fire, is it? Let's be honest. Ben Anderson is here with me for this one. And hello to everybody watching on YouTube as well. Ben, we're going to crack straight on with a question from Jake Wilkins, who says, and this is going to get you thinking, if you transplant the 2003 driver lineups into their 1995 equivalent teams, for example, Fernando Alonso and Jarno Trulli are at Benetton, who wins the 95 Constructors and Drivers Championships? So I'm going to quickly do them off the top of my head, the leading cars at least. That means we've got Schumacher and Barrichello in the 95 Ferrari. That's quite cool. We've got Ralf Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya in the 95 Williams. I quite like that as well. And Kimi Räikkönen and David Coulthard in the horrendous 95 McLarens. I guess we can discard them straight away.
Yeah, I think they don't do much. I don't see... Even though I quite like the lineup, I don't see Jacques Villeneuve and Jenson Button doing much in the 95 Tyrrell either. So we'll discount them. It comes down to the Schumacher Barrichello lineup at Ferrari, Alonso Trulli at Benetton. That's quite a tasty lineup, I think. Even though it's obviously rookie Alonso, and Montoya, Ralph at Williams. I mean, Schumacher said at the time, didn't he, that he felt the 95 Ferrari could have won the championship if he'd been in it, rather than John Lacey and Gerhard Berger. So I kind of feel like it unfortunately still goes to him, but it's just a much cooler thing because he's winning it in a Ferrari many years before he actually did.
V12 Ferrari as well. Good looking, so good sounding car. It's the proper shade of red.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to go with it, don't you? Like it's irresistible. As much as I think Alonso would have had a good crack in that 95 Benetton. It was a great car. It's rookie Alonso, isn't it? So
really,
I don't think
it's a bit early for him, probably.
Yeah, a little bit early for him, and Trulli wouldn't have been up to it. You know, Barrichello you can easily discount, and I think Montoya and Ralph is quite interesting in the Williams, but I mean, Williams obviously had problems beyond the driver lineup that year, even though the drivers didn't cover themselves in glory at many moments. Sorry, Damon. But I feel like Montoya and Schumacher probably it's going to be Montoya and Alonso even in some cases, still have the collisions because Montoya's whole aim was to go after whoever was running at the front anyway. So I feel like he kind of does similar things to Damon, but maybe just has a few more spectacular qualifying performances and maybe one or two more victories.
Yeah, I think that I could see Montoya and Ralf Schumacher doing quite a good job of having a Damon Hill, David Coulthard, Williams 95 season anyway. So some blistering speed, a few mistakes, getting frustrated when the car lets you down.
Yeah,
it
falling
would have been
out
quite
with
a good
team.
imitation. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like that's kind of much of a muchness, and I think you just transplant Schumacher into the Ferrari and he does a much better job and probably sneaks that championship over Alonso.
That's really interesting. Great question from Jake. The Schumacher narrative would have been a bit different at Ferrari if he'd come in and won a championship straight away and then had the barren years. I think we've answered questions about that before as well, where if it had gone really well at the start and then they'd produced the 1996 tank, how willing would he have been to put up with it? But yeah, superb question from Jake to kick us off. I mentioned earlier, hello to everybody on YouTube. This is usually a members only Bring Back V10s episode, but now we've got our YouTube channel up and running. We thought we'd give you one of the episodes here so you can have a peek behind the curtain. If you like what you see, come and check out the Race Members Club. You can find links in the description of this video. Next question is from Michael Armadi. It's quite a long one. I think I've already summarized it a bit in the version that you can see, Ben, but this question had to go to you, as we're about to find out. Michael says, some might argue that with the possibility, though not certainty, of the 1994 Benetton being illegal, combined with Michael Schumacher's actions in Silverstone and Adelaide, he was never a truly worthy world champion in 1994. However, should the title fight have been close in the first place? Was Schumacher's Adelaide move on Hill a pure act of unfairness, or did the FIA indirectly create the circumstances that led to the collision? Michael adds, I'm by no means a Schumacher fan, and Damon Hill deserves immense credit, but Schumacher was undoubtedly the best driver of the year. What is the proper verdict considering all these aspects? So I would summarise that question, Ben, as was Schumacher the right champion in 1994?
Yeah, I mean, this is this is a whole can of worms for me. Isn't
I'm
it?
putting you through the ringer here, Damon Hill fan club.
It's like, well, certainly this is a season that paints Schumacher not unfairly as a villain, and I think his conduct in the final race is poor. So if you just based it on the finale, he isn't the right winner because he just drove into Damon. Damon should have won the championship. Over the course of the season, Schumacher was the best driver. I think that's fair enough to say. So from that point of view, he's a worthy champion. The whole question of the disqualifications and the black flags and the politics around that season, that's more interesting because there are moments where you think, well, if he just served that stop go at Silverstone rather than just ignored the flag, then he still wins the championship. That's a silly thing to do or a silly fight to pick. But I still think on balance, you have to give it to Schumacher on the basis of a season objectively. As much as I feel that Damon should have won at the finale, that would have been a smash and grab championship for him. He didn't really own it over the whole course of the season.
And if that had happened, the question would be flipped, which would be, given how many races Schumacher was banned from and got excluded from and all this stuff that happened, was Damon Hill the right champion in 1994? Yeah,
exactly. And Senna not being there after a handful of races, etc., etc. So as much as I'd love for Damon to be the worthy winner of 1994, he wasn't. Like, he did a great job. It was, brilliant effort in awful circumstances, etc. But it was Schumacher's season. In terms of the specific point about Schumacher's driving in Adelaide and what motivated that, I don't think him driving into Hill was born of all that other stuff. I really feel that was an in-the-moment thing where Schumacher's basically driven off the road, panics and thinks, I'm about to lose the championship. I'm just going to swerve into him and make sure I don't. Pretty much the same as 97, really. Yeah.
I never felt that Schumacher's professional fouls, if you want to call them that, I don't think they were ever premeditated. It was a moment of complete panic anytime something like that happened because, he almost couldn't compute that he may be about to lose a championship or to be overtaken. Let's move on to our next question from Andres Bastanturi, who says, if Rubens Barrichello gets signed a season earlier, so 1999, and Michael Schumacher has the same injury at Silverstone, does Rubens win the championship instead of Mika Hakkinen? So we're dropping Barrichello into Ferrari in 99. He's the number 2. He gets thrust into the championship fight like Eddie Irvine did. Would Rubens have got it over the line, though?
I don't think so, honestly. I think he and Irvine were kind of much of a muchness anyway when they were Jordan teammates. There wasn't a lot to choose between them. You could argue that Barrichello made a slightly better fist of being at Ferrari when he was there. Equally, he had
better cars.
He had better cars, and he was less mercenary than Irvine as well. So maybe he cared a little bit more. I mean, they were pretty much dead level Spa and Monza anyway, despite Barrichello being in the Stewart. But the Stewart in '99 wasn't a bad car itself. So maybe it hinges on him doing a better job than Irvine did in those races, but also maybe not. And ultimately, whoever's in that car, they still get Ferrari'd at the Nürburgring, don't they? And that was kind of the pivotal moment for me that kind of said, whoever is not Schumacher in this team is not going to win the World Championship.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're probably very similar, or they're similar enough in terms of ability that the reasons that things unravelled for Irvine, and Eddie Irvine will say in any rare interview that he gives, Ferrari took the 99 car out of the wind tunnel as soon as Michael broke his leg. All that same stuff you assume happens with Barrichello. So, yeah, I can see how you've come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to give Barrichello the new bits instead of him. I mean, maybe he's a more likable character, but I don't know if that's enough to really sway Ferrari. And also, I don't see Barrichello doing better in the finale at Suzuka. Like, that was an Irvine specialist track. So I kind of feel like automatically, in a hypothetical, you have to kind of credit Eddie a little bit more at that circuit. So if he doesn't get the job done there, I don't really see how Barrichello somehow magics a title-winning performance up.
Next question is from Andy, who says, during this period, which team had the most dominant and therefore ominous first race of the season? The first thing that comes to my mind, this is Andy's suggestion, is McLaren in 98, when both cars lapped the whole field. Ben, is that the answer here?
It is a hard one to look past because of the finishing margin. The only caveat, I suppose, is that Schumacher goes missing after a handful of laps. So, you know, he wasn't having a great run of it before then. but you can't. It's difficult to judge it without him doing the full race, and then, you know, as he was the closest one, whether it would have been different. I mean, there's a few other ominous ones, like Williams in 92 at Kyalami. 16 seconds, I think it was, down the road. Prost even more so the following year, in that race we covered in the first episode of our 93 Revisited season, but obviously slightly weather affected as well. I mean, 96 as well. Williams again, Hill and Villeneuve, they were way down the road, weren't they? It just gets remembered. Well, that gets obscured by the fact that, you know, Villeneuve was so impressive in his first race, and
it was pretty clear that weekend that only Williams had turned up with a good car in 96.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of like the impression that those races leave, I think you could probably make an equally valid argument for all of those seasons. But in terms of the pure margin, I mean, you can't look past 98. There is no more dominant opener in the era.
One that should have been ominous but didn't turn out to be was 97, when Villeneuve was on pole by 1.7 seconds in Australia and 2.1, I think, ahead of the next best non-Williams. So effectively, you know, the Williams that was being driven quickly was 2 seconds up the road. That was Adrian Newey's last car. He pretty much finished it before he left Williams the winter before. I remember at that point thinking, Villeneuve's going to walk this season. He's going to win every race if he's 2 seconds quicker than, well, I guess would have probably been Schumacher in the Ferrari. And you mentioned 93 Revisited that we're covering at the moment. We did 97 Revisited last year. And as we know all too well, that dominance was never really seen again. So that's kind of the flip. We had this ominous moment in qualifying that never reared its head again.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, isn't it? Because the season opener, sometimes it is a complete portent of things to come. You know, like Mansell's 92 season, it's like, we'll see you later, isn't it? But even 98, you know, it doesn't take long for the field to get to Argentina, and suddenly Schumacher's bothering the McLarens, and, you know, teams are working out things, especially when the rules change like they did so drastically for that season, and the script can flip so quickly, like you say. I mean, 97, I'd almost forgotten actually that qualifying margin because so much other crazy stuff happened that season. Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, for me, 97 Australia qualifying is completely forgettable for obvious reasons.
Those obvious reasons, for anyone who can't recall it, is Damon Hill almost failing to qualify inside 107%. But let's not drag Ben
with the number one, with
again.
the number one on his car. I mean, come on, it's just, you know, horrendous.
Part of the reason he almost didn't make that race was because Villeneuve was so far ahead, which pushed the 107% bar up. So we're digressing massively here. But if Damon had been going against Frenson's time, which was 1.7 slower, he'd have had loads of margin to play with in his shed of an Arrows. Let's move on to the next question from James Mellier, who says, which grid of car liveries from the V10 era did you like the most? And James says, for me, it's 2000. The Jaguar green, the orange Arrows, Williams BMW, and Minardi and Jordan yellow put it ahead of 1996. I do like, we get so many of these questions from our members where they ask us a cool question and then they say, I think this. And it's always quite good to have those as a starting point. But what would you pick, Ben?
I picked 95 from the seasons that I followed Formula One closely. I really like the 95 cars. You've got the proper shade of Ferrari red, which is very important. But I think the peak for me is 93, actually, because you've got the Williams in the proper colours. with the kind of the yellow as well as the blue. And as much as I like the Rothmans, it wasn't as good as the prior camel livery, and the whole Sega thing and whatnot. I mean, I had those models as toys as a kid, so actually that's the bit of nostalgia in our 93 revisited thing that I'm really enjoying. It's taken me right back to my childhood, even though it's a season I didn't live. It's a season I played with toy cars. So yeah, 93 is the peak for me.
Yeah, that's a good choice. There's loads of options. I can understand why James picked 2000 because there were just so many vibrant colours that year. I didn't actually like Jordan went for a more luminous shade of yellow because they thought it looked better on TV. I preferred the richer yellow that we had before. So I did actually really like the 99 grid as well. Lots of good liveries there. And over time, I've even become fond of the Zipper BAR, which I thought was horrendous at the time. But you had these two iconic liveries, the 555 and the Lucky Strike, that we really should have seen race properly in F1. 95 is a decent shout. 93 was good as well. Even 97 was pretty good. Last year of Rothmans Williams, first year of Silver West McLaren.
Yeah.
The Benettons were still in their lively mild 7. I liked 2003 as well because you had a really nice Williams BMW livery by then. The standard Ferrari and McLaren liveries of the time. I liked the Renault, the blue and yellow of the Renault was really cool.
Yeah, it's like the Telefonica colours, wasn't it? Basically,
I hadn't quite got Telefonica on it by then. Still just mild 7 with the Renault colours. The Jaguar was green and looked pretty good at that point. BAR had added some colour to their quite bland white cars that they'd had at the start of the year. So yeah, some lots of options here. I feel like we have more options to choose from for cool, colourful grids from this era than you would for, say, the last 10 or 15 years. But we try not to dig out the present too much on Bring Back V10s. So let's move on to our next question from AJ Rios. I think that's how you say it. Who says, if the V10 era had as much on-screen data and live timing data as we have now, do you think we'd remember it as fondly? Can you think of a race that would have been ruined or perhaps enhanced by the data we have now?
Interesting question. It's tempting instinctively to think, oh yeah, I mean, there is a point to say that too much data does spoil F1. There's too many known.
You can know too much.
Yeah, you can definitely know too much, and the teams probably do now. So reining back data and simulation, etc. In terms of even drivers comparing to their teammates, being able to hide stuff. Now it's all about everything's on the table. So it's like, how much can you absorb it? How much can you ingest it? How much can you translate it? It's a different kind of challenge. But from the spectator point of view or the viewer point of view, I don't think you can have too much. I mean, going back over a few of these 90s races, I mean, 93 Brazil was hilarious for the fact that they were showing like live heart rate data on screen from, I think it was Senna. And at one point, Frank Williams, they claimed as well. So there's always been this push to kind of, show the public, a peek behind the curtain, if you like. And then that's good. You want to know what speeds people are going at. If you could compare traces of, why Senna was losing a second to Prost in qualifying at the early part of 93, that'd be good to know as a fan, I think.
I think we could have all benefited from timing screens and more on-screen data at Donington in 93 when there's 400 pit stops going on.
Yeah, exactly. How many pit stops has somebody made? Just what tire is everybody on?
Yeah.
It's just kind of stuff you take for granted now. So I think from a watching point of view, the experience would only be enhanced, I think, from having more data. Maybe also the teams would make slightly better, faster strategic decisions as well, because there are sometimes some races you watch back and knowing what you know now about undercuts and overcuts and tyre advantage and whatnot, you can work out why so and so would pit at a certain point or whether they should or not, and the TV presentation is kind of behind the curve on that. that it's much more reactive. It's like, oh, and so's in the pits. Are they coming in to retire? Are they coming in to take on new tires?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a crapshoot in terms of whether you can you know what they're doing. But that's a digression. In terms of races being enhanced, probably the one I would pick is the '94 Japanese Grand Prix. That weird
aggregate timing race.
Yeah, because that is a race against the clock rather than just against the other cars you're seeing on the track. And
imagine that with the live tower that updates through when they go through every mini sector like we have now.
Yeah.
That would have been amazing.
Exactly, yeah, because you really needed that to know what the hell was going on. So I think that would have actually really enhanced the experience too, because you could have seen the gaps changing, and you know then exactly exactly what the differences are, and the tension would build up. Whereas I remember watching that race at the time and just kind of thinking, well, I know what needs to happen, but you really weren't sure until you just got to the end, and then it was like, okay, this is the order.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one, because I think the live timing data would have made that amazing and incredibly tense while it was going on, but would have made the finish less dramatic. If you watch that race in the UK, Damon crosses a line and then you're hanging on for I think is that the way round they were for Schumacher to come across the line, and then Murray Walker is waiting for the timing screen and then belts out the gap. It's 3 point something seconds or something, and it's hugely dramatic, famous moment. If we'd had live timing data, we'd have gone, oh, okay, well, unless Damon goes off here, he's got about 3 seconds in the bag. But I can totally see that it would have made the rest of the race, where we were in the dark, not really knowing how the gap was fluctuating, that would have been absolutely amazing to have live on screen basically the whole time, which is what we have now. The race I would pick and I haven't quite decided if this would be enhanced or have made it worse. For me, it's Hungary 97 for 2 reasons. The first is the early laps of Hungary 97 are absolutely bonkers. And the reason for that is that Michael Schumacher's tyres effectively boil immediately and fall apart. And he's holding up the field. I think at one point there's a train of 7 cars, effectively a lead battle right at the front of the field. And Murray Walker's going absolutely bananas. And it's mega exciting. This is incredible. You don't get this in Formula One. What we would know now is we would all understand, because we all have a great understanding just watching. We go, his tyres have gone. The Hungaroring this weekend is shredding Goodyear tyres. We'd probably have radio traffic with Michael saying, the tyres have gone already. And the Ferrari pit wall, I guess, would be saying, can you just extend by a couple of laps to get us into a window? So you'd have had a totally different understanding. And I can't tell if that would have made it more or less exciting. I feel that there's a potential that people have gone, this is tyres ruining the racing. Michael Schumacher, the greatest driver on the grid, can't even do 3 laps before his Ferrari becomes a shopping trolley that's just completely in the way. So, yeah, I can't work out if that's better or worse if we'd had the knowledge there. And I guess, I know it all happened very quickly at the end, and sorry to put you through this again, more Damon Hill pain here, but we were getting the gaps kind of once a lap, or we were getting the sector times if the TV producer put them on the screen. And by that, I mean the 2 sectors around the lap, not the mini sectors. So you didn't have quite as clear an idea of how Damon's pace was fluctuating once the arrows was falling apart for his 50 pence piece or whatever it was that went wrong. Again, if we'd had the live mini sector data, we'd have seen exactly how much time Villeneuve was taking out of him over those final few laps. And I don't know if that would have perhaps taken away some of the mystery around how much trouble Damon was really in, because you kind of had to wait for him to cross the line for Martin Brundle, I assume it was, to say, he's lost 29 seconds on that lap. You had to wait kind of a minute and a half every time to get a clearer picture of what was going on. So that, I think, can be part of the reason we look back on some of these races so fondly, is that we had less knowledge, so things would happen and it would almost surprise you when the timing screen updated and the commentators relayed that information to you.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. It's like everyone's in the dark to an equal extent almost.
Yeah.
So you're kind of all living the same confusion, lack of information, what have you, together. I think if you transposed sort of modern knowledge onto the end of that race, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference, because Damon was the first realization that Damon was in trouble. It was clear, it was quite significant. So kind of the scale is obvious, and therefore the kind of minutiae of it is less important, because he's just going to be, falling like a stone, and it's how high can he hang on. But I think the start of the race, probably if you extrapolate all of that modern knowledge and tyres and the window and management and whatnot, it doesn't happen that way, because the teams know that and therefore work around it. Schumacher knows it. Therefore knows how to
wouldn't
deal
have
with
blasted out of the traps, would he?
No.
He would have managed his pace like we see today.
Yeah, exactly. And also, Goodyear probably wouldn't have made a tyre so bad, because that would have fed back from an early point. Maybe, I think it was Canada, they had blisters, didn't they? But not quite to such a devastating effect, and certainly not so early. So that would have all fed back into the Goodyear tyre loop. And by Hungary, they would have come up with a different solution, which meant the blistering was less. And in combination with all that knowledge and the temperature sensors and whatnot, Ferrari would have been screaming at Schumacher to say, your front tyres are too much, or this one's 5 degrees over, so you need to kind of manage that. So it would have probably made the start of the race a lot more boring than it was in reality.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think it's good. It's good that it's the way it was back then. And I think it's probably good that it's the way it is now. So people have that greater understanding today, because it makes F1 so much more interesting to follow. If you want to follow to that level of depth, there's so much more to get your teeth into than there was in the V10 era.
And it's still possible, even in this day and age where there's so much more known and so much more data, etc., for it to just randomly go wrong. If you look at, George Russell in Jeddah, and Mercedes suddenly don't know why their tyres are not working, and he's completely routing them, etc. Apart from the Schumacher Hungary thing of you push too hard. So the same old traps you can still fall into, even if you have all the data in the world, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's definitely a good thing. Right, final question is from Jasper Pendlebury, who says, which race in the V10 era do you have the fondest memories of, and which one would you sell your left kidney to forget?
Okay, so this is a good question. I mean, from a Damon Hill point of view,
which is how I assumed you would answer this question.
I mean, this is obviously there would be the 96 Japanese Grand Prix clinching the World Championship, or the 98 Belgian Grand Prix, winning in a car not a Williams. But objectively speaking, I think it probably would be the 99 Italian Grand Prix, just because of how crazy that race was, pivotal in the title race, Jordan being in the mix for the championship, etc. I think in terms of just sort of neutrally, or starting to more neutrally enjoy Formula One at that point, because it was clear what trajectory Damon's career was heading on.
Damon Hill had checked out, so would your fandom.
yeah, exactly. I needed something else to cling to, and that was just a really cool, interesting, and also not weather affected race, and obviously the kind of iconic Hakkinen crying in the bushes moment too. So it had a bit of everything. And then in terms of a race to forget, I mean, it's obvious as a pick, but it has to be 2005 Indy, because it was just a complete farce.
Yeah, I wondered about picking that one. We benefit from it here on Bring Back V10s, because we covered it in great detail and spoke to several people involved. It was one of my favourite episodes to put together, but it was obviously a joke of a race. I think until I had to do the research, I'm not sure I ever watched it in full, because I was driving back from the Le Mans 24 hours when it was happening. And in the days before smartphones and social media, you were kind of getting texts and phone calls in the car, driving back through France, going, we'd heard in the afternoon French time that, there were photographers and journalists feeding back that it doesn't look like anyone's going to race. And then you were hearing people saying, oh, so-and-so in the paddock has put 500 quid on a Jordan to get on the podium and this sort of thing.
Good bet.
Yeah. And then you just had the information starting to filter through. I'm sure we were on the road And then I'm sure someone I was in the car with got a text saying they've all pulled in and there's only 6 cars. And you're thinking, this can't be real. But obviously, once you get past that drama of, I can't believe this has actually happened, the race was a pointless exercise where the Ferraris drive around miles ahead of the Jordans and the Minardis. The Ferraris, I think, almost collided, didn't they, after a pit stop? But yeah, just a nonsense race. Fondest memories for me, again, from a fandom point of view, as a Villeneuve fan, Jerez 97, not just because Villeneuve wins the title. That is a brilliant race. There's loads going on. The laps up, the race up until they collide is really exciting because you've got the championship protagonists are going at it at the front. You've got strategic interference with Frentzen getting in the way of Schumacher, bringing him back towards Villeneuve. You've got the McLarens trying to stay out of the way, and they pit at inopportune moments just to get out of the way. Then you have the collision. Then you have the madness of the Williams and McLaren arrangement at the finish, where the race gets handed to Mika Häkkinen. You mentioned Italy 99, which is really interesting. One that I have the fondest memories of is Nürburgring 99. Crazy race, obviously. Great that we had a shock winner. There were so many people that could have won that race. I don't think we haven't covered it yet in full. We've dabbled in it in some Jordan-related episodes. But the other reason I like that so much is that is the race that really resulted in me choosing the career that I ended up having working in journalism and the media, because we did an English project at school where you had to write 2 versions of the same story for a newspaper project. And you had to do a biased and a non-biased story. So I did a report on this race, styled up as a newspaper report, one where I did Johnny Herbert wins, brilliant, chaotic race at the Nürburgring, and just covered it all. And then my biased report was all about how Ferrari blew it. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? But Rubens Barrichello gets Nürburgringed if he's in the Eddie Irvine car. So I went massively on that. The classic Martin Brundle. They're having a committee meeting about the tyres. Just stick it on and get him out. So, I enjoyed that. And I got a rare A at school for it. I went,
well done.
Well, that was fun and clearly quite easy, and I'm really good at it. Maybe this should be the career I pursue. So I have very fond memories of that race for that reason. For races to forget, like I had Indy as well. I'm trying to think of a race where something really bad happened to my favourite drivers of the era. So either Villeneuve or Nigel Mansell in earlier years. But I can't. There's not one I can put my finger on immediately, because my fandom was never to the point that if something went wrong for my driver, I couldn't enjoy the rest of the race. So there were boring races. I know that, for example, Spain 99 is often held up as one of the most boring races of all time. But I quite like that one because Villeneuve made a really good start in the BAR, and he's part of the reason the race was so boring, because he held everyone up behind the McLarens and then got jumped in the pit stops. So I always feel that there's always something you can cling to in a race. Indy doesn't really give you that, certainly on track. I'm eliminating anything where there was kind of tragedy or something disastrous on that front that happened, because we all want to forget those. So I'd say it's easier, and I like this because we should end on a positive note. It's easier to remember races, to think back of races that you remember fondly, and actually quite hard to think of ones that we all need to forget. And I like it that way around. So let's end it there. Thank you everyone for the questions. And to those of you watching on YouTube, this is a peek behind the curtain of the sort of stuff you can get in the Race Members Club. It's a great time to check it out. If you're checking this out shortly after this video goes up, we do have a promotion running at the moment. We're celebrating 75 years of Formula One by giving 75% off our memberships at the moment. So head to the links in the description underneath this video if you want to get 75% off your first month, so you can get stuck in to all of the stuff we have already there. Lots of archive stuff, particularly from Bring Back V10s. We've talked about a few times here. Ben and I have mentioned 1993 Revisited that we're covering at the moment. Last year we did 1997 Revisited. There's loads more Q&As like this. There's interviews with people from the era. That stuff is all organized in our archive. You can check loads of it out just in your first month while you're getting 75% off. And the guys who are on the road covering F1 modern day in, day out. There's always bonus content from them, whether it's chats at the hotels or in the car or the bus to and from the track, and sometimes some insights from the track as well. Plus, you get to ask questions in our post-race podcast. So there's all kinds of benefits. If you've not tried it out, now is a great time to give it a go. So thank you for watching. We'll keep coming up with goodies that we can grab for you from all the stuff we're doing from Bring Back V10s to stick out here on YouTube. And you will get as close to every single episode will come out in full during season 12, which starts in July.